Okay, so negotiation. It's one of those skills, isn't it? Whether you're closing a massive business deal or, just trying to agree on a project deadline with a colleague, it really is essential.
Absolutely. It pops up everywhere. And often it's the little things, the actual words we use, that can make or break whether we get what we need.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We want to pull out some really practical language, some strategies you can actually use by looking at a real-world negotiation scenario.
Yeah, we've got this great transcript. It's a role play, actually, between a clothing wholesaler, they're the buyer, and someone representing the manufacturer.
And what's useful here is it covers the whole flow. You see them stating what they need initially, going back and forth on offers, accepting some, rejecting others.
And then finally trying to land on something they both agree on.
It's a situation I think many of us, listening will recognize. These conversations can feel, well, pretty complicated sometimes.
They really can. Lots of moving parts.
Definitely. But don't worry, we're going to break down some key bits from this negotiation, make it really digestible. We'll focus on specific phrases, the thinking behind them, so you can hopefully use them yourselves. All right, let's get into it. First things first, you've got to be clear about what you want, right?
Absolutely. Step one, laying out your needs clearly. And just as important, really trying to understand what the other person needs too. That sets the stage.
And in this example, the wholesaler, the buyer, does a pretty good job of this right at the start. They say exactly what kind of products they're after. Unbranded clothes, T-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, zip-ups, long sleeves, pretty detailed.
And that specificity helps immediately. The manufacturer knows straight away, okay, can we even do this? Saves everyone time.
Yeah.
And they also talk about volume expectations early on. They mention starting with maybe 500 to 1,500 units per SKU.
SKU meaning like each specific item variation.
Exactly. And planning to scale up later. Plus, they flag that popular sizes and colors will probably need higher numbers. It gives the manufacturer a sense of the potential scale right away.
And I liked how they phrased the flexibility part. They said things like, I suggest starting small and scaling up later. And we're thinking of starting with around 500 units per SKU.
Right.
But also, we'd prefer to keep things flexible to begin with. It's clear, but doesn't lock them in too tight initially. Why is giving those initial numbers, even if they're just estimates, so important, though?
Well, it does a few things. First, it anchors the conversation. Gives the other side something concrete, shows you're serious, you've actually thought about it.
Okay.
Second, it shows you're prepared. You're not just kicking tires, you have a real need. And third, it just gives them something to react to. They can start thinking about their capacity, maybe even initial pricing ideas.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so stating your position, clearly that's one side. But the other side is finding out what the other party needs, what their constraints are.
Exactly. And the buyer here does that well, too, by asking some really targeted questions, like straight away, what kind of volumes are we looking at? Trying to get the manufacturer's view.
And they dig into the practical stuff, too, production, delivery.
Yeah.
Asking, what's the situation regarding production and delivery? How long does it take you to process orders? That's thinking ahead about the whole supply chain.
Which then leads them to explain their own warehouse issues. Limited space means they can't take huge deliveries all at once. They need to order based on stock levels. That's vital info for the manufacturer.
Absolutely critical context. And there's specific on variations, 2 sizes, XS to XXL, 16 colors just for T-shirts. That tells the manufacturer, okay, this isn't just a simple bulk order.
Right, there's complexity. And beyond those direct questions, they also use some good open-ended ones, like asking, what do you have in mind exactly? That invites the manufacturer to just talk more broadly.
Yeah, those can be powerful.
They really can. You often get information you wouldn't have thought to ask for directly.
And there was that conversational bit, quite informal but effective, where the buyer asks, and that would be per month, or just letting the sentence hang.
Yeah, that's a great example. It gently pushes the other person to give more detail without being demanding. It's very natural in spoken English, even in a negotiation.
Right. Not something you'd write in an email, maybe, but it works in conversation. Okay, so we've got clarity on your side and asking questions to understand their side. Now, often what you can offer depends on what they can do. This leads us to setting conditions, which feels like a huge part of negotiating.
Oh, definitely. It's all about those if this, then that scenarios, establishing the trade-offs.
And the dialogue is full of examples, especially using if sentences. They really link things like volume and delivery to the price.
Exactly. Like when the purchaser asks, if we're ordering around 100,000 units at one time, what kind of per unit pricing can you offer? Clear condition, clear question about the outcome.
Or, if we need higher volumes, would you be able to go lower? Exploring that direct link again.
And then the more complex one. If we commit to a minimum volume over a 6-month period, but with a flexible delivery schedule, could you offer us the same price? Now they're layering conditions, commitment, flexibility, and price.
And notice the modal verbs flying around can, could, would. They soften it, make it sound more like exploring possibilities rather than making demands.
That's key. It keeps the tone collaborative. And while if is super common, the source shows other ways to phrase conditions too.
Yeah, like the manufacturer uses assuming that. For example, assuming that you need a flexible schedule, we could offer $6 per unit. It frames it as more hypothetical.
Like a what if. And similarly, they use supposing. As in, supposing you could commit to a minimum monthly volume, we could go down to 550. Another way to explore potential deals.
But then there's as long as, which feels much firmer. The manufacturer says, as long as there were some limitations on the delivery timing, I think that would be acceptable. That sounds like a non-negotiable requirement.
It does, doesn't it? Assuming and supposing are exploratory, but as long as signals this needs to happen for the deal to work. A really useful distinction in phrasing. Okay, conditions are set, needs are clearer, but inevitably you hit points where you just don't agree. Sticking points. They happen in almost every negotiation, right?
They really do. It'd be weird if everything just lined up perfectly first time. The key is how you handle those disagreements.
Right, and this dialogue shows both direct ways to say no and maybe some softer approaches. On the direct side, the manufacturer just states, regarding the flexible delivery price, we won't be able to offer you the lower price. Pretty blunt.
Yeah, or later, we can't offer our best prices without a regular commitment on your part. And also, we're not willing to absorb those costs when talking about unpredictable orders. Quite firm.
They are firm. And sometimes that directness is needed, right? Especially if it's a critical point for you. It cuts through any ambiguity.
Yeah.
But is there a risk? When do you choose direct versus maybe something a bit more indirect?
That's a great question. Directness is crystal clear, no doubt. But yeah, it can sometimes sound a bit harsh, maybe damage the relationship if you're not careful. An indirect approach might be better if you want to soften the blow, keep things feeling collaborative, or maybe signal that the door isn't completely shut on that point.
Okay.
So instead of just no, you might say, that particular number is challenging for us right now, but maybe we could look at. It's about finding that balance, being clear but also mindful of the relationship.
Makes sense. And like you said, sometimes you have to be direct. The source mentions extending that language, like we won't be able to finish the work in such a short space of time, just clear and factual.
But then there are also those slightly less direct ways to signal strong disagreement, which can help keep the mood positive.
Yeah, like the purchaser saying, I'll come right out and say that's not going to work for us regarding the monthly deliveries for the lower price. It's direct about the outcome, but the intro phrase softens it slightly.
Or when they stress how vital flexible logistics are by saying, there's no way around this. It underlines the importance without attacking the other person.
And the manufacturer uses, I'm sorry, but I have to draw a line here, when the risk feels too high for them. That clearly signals a limit.
And it's worth pointing out, even when they're disagreeing firmly, they mostly stay calm, professional, no personal attacks. And there's that moment where the manufacturer suggests, shall we take a 5-minute break? Classic move to ease tension.
Such a good tactic. Just stepping away for a few minutes can totally reset things, help break that deadlock. Okay, so you've hit an impasse, maybe taken a break. How do you get things rolling again? Suggesting new ideas seems crucial here.
Absolutely. Someone needs to break the silence with a potential solution. Be proactive.
And we see that happening.
Yeah.
The manufacturer kicks it off with, I have a proposal which I hope can make this work for everyone. Positive framing, signals, they want to find a way.
Then they lay it out. Here's my solution. Proposing that annual contract with flexible delivery, but minimum quarterly volumes and penalties. It's a concrete attempt to bridge the gap.
And later they try again. I'll make another offer. Adjusting the price, suggesting a 6-month contract instead, still with quarterly minimums, shows they're willing to adapt.
And it's not just about making offers, it's also inviting them. The manufacturer asks, what's your idea and what would you suggest? That brings the other person back into the problem solving.
Yeah, it makes it collaborative. And then reacting to proposals, the purchaser says, that's a good offer to one of the revised ones.
And also, I think this should be feasible. And feasible is a good word here. I mean, not just possible, but practical to actually do. Like, we have the resources, it fits our system, it's doable in reality.
Good distinction. And eventually they do land on a deal. 6-month contract, minimum quarterly volume, agreed prices for different items, and that flexible delivery but with 3 weeks notice. It shows the process works. Propose, react, adjust.
Exactly. It leads to that compromise.
Yeah.
But once you get there, once you've agreed, there's one more super important step you just can't skip.
Ah, you mean summarizing everything, making sure you're both actually on the same page about what you just agreed.
Precisely. It's so easy for little misunderstandings to creep in otherwise. And the dialogue has good examples. The manufacturer says, let's go through the main points, and then lists them out.
And I liked how they used regarding to structure it. Regarding delivery, orders are flexible, but you commit to giving us 3 weeks notice. Very clear, very organized.
And just as vital as flagging what's not finalized yet, the purchaser says, we still need to settle the exact details of sizes, colors, and so on. And the manufacturer brings up, there's also the matter of penalties in case you don't meet your minimum volume, and the need for separate minimums for different product types, using phrases like, we still need to settle, or there's also the matter of, acknowledges loose ends without derailing the main agreement.
Yeah, manages expectations. And then finally, outlining what happens next. The manufacturer says, we'll put this in writing and send you a provisional agreement within the next few days.
Followed by, if everything looks okay, we can proceed with drafting a formal contract. And that phrasal verb draw up is common for preparing legal docs like contracts. Useful bit of jargon.
Definitely. So summarizing and setting next steps really ties everything up neatly.
It does. Ensures clarity, confirms the agreement, and sets the path forward.
So look, whether it's a multi-million-dollar deal or, I don't know, figuring out who takes the bins out, this language of negotiation, it's just incredibly useful, isn't it?
It really is. Being able to say what you need clearly, understand where someone else is coming from, and then finding that common ground.
Okay.
It's fundamental, professionally and personally. And hopefully diving into this specific scenario has given you some, really concrete phrases and ideas you can actually start using right away.
Yeah, we've touched on stating your case, setting conditions, handling those tricky disagreements, making proposals, and then locking it all down with a summary.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. Thinking back on this negotiation we've unpacked, what's one phrase or maybe one strategy that really stood out to you? And how could you consciously try using it next time you find yourself needing to reach an agreement? Just reflecting on those little communication details can really make a difference.